told people that since every application that we had came in, with the exception of one, was a house that had been almost every application were houses that had been built or permitted after 1989. They were all within 1 mile of PGV. And so we basically said that we would treat them on a first-come, first-served basis. The one exception has been we've had an application that came in for relocation from a house that was permitted prior to 1989. And under our rules, since there is a preference for if you've been permitted prior to 89 or if you were within 1 mile, because they fit both of those criteria, they moved to that first set. Because, in other words, they were building before PGV. And so that's one of the criteria. And so, but we have about $4.5 million in requests if you take the current real property assessed value and run it out at 130%. And we had about 2.1 million in available funds. Because that's the other thing I may need to come and talk to you about is currently the county code says that there's a reserve of 1 million for relocation. There's nothing in the county code that gives me a mechanism to touch the $1 million. So I need to amend the county code with presentability folks so that that $1 million can be used for relocation, because we now currently have more requests than we have money. We anticipate revenue in the vicinity of $600,000 to $700,000 a year from PGV, based on current production. And so, if you look at $4.5 million and $2.1 million, obviously we're not going to get through all those requests in 1 or 2 years. It's going to take several years to go through those. And during that time, there are a couple of things that could occur. The values could go up so that the buyout might be higher, or some of the homes, may drop off the list. We already had one person who changed their mind and decided that they didn't want to be relocated. But I think we're looking at maybe 3 years before we can get through that list based on the revenues that we have.
When I'm looking at, right now in front of me is the county code, and it says a minimum balance of 1 million shall be maintained in the fund for expenditures relating to geothermal relocation. Ain't that, reading that out, doesn't that state that that minimum balance is for geothermal relocation?
Well, that's one of the issues that we have. If there's a minimum balance, then you can't go below it. You can't go below the $1 million. And so because of the wording, we're concerned that we can't actually touch the $1 million. So we're proposing an amendment that we're going to bring to you, that when we have these, because the idea was that the $1 million was there so you couldn't spend it on community benefits and it would be there. But there wasn't a mechanism that said that when I had the requests and they exceeded the amount, that I could go and use the $1 million. And so I'm going to make an amendment that I'm going to propose.
I'm trying to understand your logic. You said that according to that sentence, it's stating that at all times there should be a minimum balance of 1 million. But I think if the purpose for that 1 million is for relocation, I believe you can tap into that 1 million. It says that a minimum balance of 1 million shall be maintained in the fund for expenditures relating to geothermal relocation. Ain't all these applicants for geothermal relocation?
We have $4.5 million. We have $2.1 million available. That's not counting the $1 million. And so my concern is that I need to make sure that any ambiguity in the language of the ordinance is cleared up. And the reason is that there's a provision in the county code, and that says basically if one of us cuts a check and we didn't have the authority to cut the check, we're on the hook for it. And so because there's some concern that there's some ambiguity on whether it allows me to touch that million, but when it says minimum balance, it typically one person reading it says you can't touch it. It has to always be there. And so I want to clean it up so that it's really clear, and I don't look Jeremy.
Director, what core council is actually in charge of planning?
Currently it's Mr. Brilhante.
Bill, has he looked into it yet?
This was a conversation we had with finance.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, we're gonna bring this back to focusing. And by the way, your time is up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Ford.
Quick question. To digitize all those records, which does need to be done, have you ever used student help during the summer where the
Yes,
state?
we have.
Okay, that's all I want.
We constantly look for volunteers.
I like your question. It's real quick and. Councilmember, Councilmember Williams.
Following up on the digital, I also pushing. Can we just make it so that people submit right now, currently submit their applications digitally in addition to hard, so that when there are all these tight time periods, 30 days, and get things out to the agencies and to the CDP committees, it would be really helpful so that we can get those submitted in digital. I mean,
we're moving in that direction.
Can I maybe at some point I was told we need some kind of ordinance or rule or new rule to do that.
But we have a lot of stuff that comes in on CDs that typically in order for some things, some people can't receive it because of the volume. And if you're transmitting it via email to an agency, you end up crashing because it really is a function of whether all the agencies you're sending stuff to have the capacity on their because we send it via email, and does their email server have the capacity? Because we had this happen on an appeal where somebody was sending everything into us in email, and it crashed a number of people's email accounts because they sent us 72 scholarly articles they found on the internet, each of which was 30, 40 pages long. And so you have to upgrade, and we want to move in that direction, but in order to move in that direction, then everybody on your list has to have the equipment.
Or they can get it hard. I just think that is something that we could do immediately and not be having to have it backlog. Also, I know you've been good in terms of following some of the state legislation, and I just, I'm sure that adds another burden to your department. And as you know, was really worried about that Bill 1027 that would have taken away all county role in SMA for state property. So I would hope that we can at some point find someone that would be being a watchdog and not have that being an additional burden in your department. So I just want to say I appreciate where you have followed state legislation. And Leslie, just on the CIPs, once something is on there, let's just say in South Kahala, a regional transit hub or the Puako wastewater study, just how does one move that so we get the funding or we're getting the grants or that we really coordinate? Because just getting it on the wish list is just like the preamble step one.
It's been my experience that when it actually comes time to float a bond, the council has usually put a list of what they want funded on the bonds. Usually the list exceeds the amount though. Like you float 100 million and you guys put 115 million, but that has been done in the past. I think the biggest problem for the county, and this is kind of because I deal with the CIP coming in, is when you're looking at the CIP, the problem is you've got stuff we gotta do because we got sued. So all the ADA compliance is part of a consent decree. You got stuff we gotta do because it's repair and maintenance and it's to prevent a lawsuit. You've got stuff you need to do because of some other need. But I'm just saying that once you get through the legal mandates, the prevent the lawsuit mandates, all of those things, and a change in the and then something comes along, the EPA changes the rules on you, and we had 104 cesspools we had to close, gang cesspools. That was an unintended expenditure. That a lot of times there's not a whole lot left to do on the want to projects when you get through the need to or have to projects. And so I think if the economy gets better and we start seeing better revenue, then you can start talking about a lot of the wish list kinds of things. Or you have to go out and see whether there's the state can give you money for it. The Kapoho study that we did on wastewater, part of that was money that came from the state.
Okay, and just lastly, will removing the furloughs be of some help to you?
In terms of
staff time, I mean.
Yeah, there are things that we don't get to, but it's one day a month, but it won't make. I still need the staff for cultural resources.
So if we gave you 10 new staff, you'd be.
If I had an archaeologist and an because you need that, and part of the problem has been because you don't have the staff on the state level.
Right.
And so you're waiting. You can't do some of the shoreline stuff because the state guys aren't there, or you're waiting for a report because the state doesn't have it. And so it would be nice to have some of that staff on the county side.
Okay, thank you. We did the round one, and I got to be real fair because, I just want to be fair to the rest of the council members who wanted to go a second round. However, I didn't allow that earlier, and I'm not going to allow it again. And so if you have something that you need to speak with her that wasn't addressed earlier, I would ask that you make an appointment with department heads and ask for further questions. So Council Member Kanuha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of these budget requests, a little over 400,000 of them, dollars of them all.
Are you sure?
What would be your number one priority in terms of what you would need to have funded?
Cultural resources staffing.
Okay.
Because I think it plays into all the CDPs. I'm not saying that the CDPs aren't more important. It's just that every CDP had a cultural resources preservation component, and this is one of those things that implements the CDPs, and I need that staff.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is one of the ones where I'm real passionate about this specific commission, and if you need the funding for these positions, I'd be pushing for it definitely. But in the training aspect, the $20,000 for training, who would you send? I mean, where would the training come from?
What I'm hoping to do is use that to fly in, because it makes much more sense to pay for one person to fly in and train 9 people than to pay for 9 people to fly to Honolulu. So I want to I'm looking at the fact that when I talk to the state guys, they frequently don't have the money.
Yeah.
So if I want to train our cultural resources, I may need to pay for the state historic preservation people to come. It may be that they have money and I don't need to, but the reason that request was there was the idea being that I could fly in some people to do the training.
I'm just hope that if that is funded, that the state guys would have enough time, because I know they're being defunded, and it's just a mess right now in state historic preservation.
It might be something like bringing somebody from Kauai who's in charge of their historic preservation division, and not, you know, and who's done this, to come in and say, hey, this is how Kauai does it. These are the problems that we've encountered. And so I want to be innovative, but you know, I think the state may be interested, because the whole idea is that if we set this up properly, they may be able to shift some of their work to us and provide us funding to go with it. Now, I would not take the work without some funding. But they're under the gun. And part of that local certified government is it's a pass-through. The money comes through the state, gives it to you, because, like, you know, anything that's 50 years old qualifies as historic, which means the house I grew up in Upper Kaumana. And so anytime somebody's going to do something, you're supposed to kind of review to see whether that's a house that you want to look at. Is it something that, and you would be surprised at, like when I talked about the plantation houses, what people are interested in. Because there's an interest in how did that plantation look like? What did those original buildings look like? And so it's not the Taj Mahal necessarily. It's something that shows how people lived and worked, and where the store was, you know, the storefront. Some of those old stores, we're losing some of those, and they're interesting because they evoke a particular period of time in history. And so there's an interest in it, making sure that some of that survives. Not necessarily every building, but that some of it, so you have an example of what it looked like in 1930s. What did a store look like? Instead of having to recreate it in a museum. Yeah.
Thanks. Just a really quick one. Okay. And as for the conference, it happens in Hawaii Island every 4 years?
Every 4, but it's been actually 5 years, because we all elected 1 year not to hold a conference, to kind of push it off. And we found that you need to offer this training. And the good thing about having it on island is I can send commissioners here at a much lower cost, because I'm not paying for airfare. And some of them, especially the ones that live in Kona, aren't necessarily going to stay in the hotel overnight, so I don't have the hotel cost. So I can send more people in. So it's an opportunity for us to do this training. This year's conference, hang on. Our theme is Papa Ho'olala, and planning with ancient wisdom and modern technology. So we're going to be focusing somewhat on alternate energy, aquaculture, agriculture, historic and cultural preservation. Those are some of the themes that we envision in the HCPO, and how you do kind of like economic development through cultural preservation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other council members that have not
I'm just gonna
spoken yet?
I'm just gonna do a point of order. There's a rule number 19 on, it's number 9 on committees. It says that in case of a committee, a council member may speak more than twice on a matter before that body, but only after every council member choosing to speak has spoken. And I just want to say, this is a finance committee, and we are allowed to speak more than once.
Right, but I had made that decision because of time, and that you have, the council members have the ability to meet with the with the individual department heads for their individual questions of your own concern. So I did that earlier.
Well,
and
this is relating to actually one of the things that she wanted to talk about.
Yeah, would you be able to talk about that with her?
I'm just asking to be able to speak one more time. And we would actually have to suspend our rules if we were to go on.
You mean, is that correct, Jay, that we
Right.
have to suspend the rules? Because
Right now,
I made a determination at the beginning so that it wouldn't go off and the amount of time that we're allowed, that each council member be prepared enough to ask the questions that you need to. And if there's any other questions that would come up because of other conversations that happened, that we would go to the department heads and speak. I did that to another council member. I just want to be fair with all the council members. Because if I now allow you, then I got to go back and call another department that I did not allow Ms. Ford another chance to speak.
and I just also want to state I did use all my 5 minutes, and I still had a little bit more. It wasn't where I only had 2 minutes.
But Ms. Ford had 5 minutes too, so I had to let her know that her time was up also. I'm just trying to be fair, so can you tell me what the rules?
As chair, you have the discretion to run the meeting in a timely and orderly manner, as far as decorum, the content, and as far as time management. So we are past, our expected time. So I would suggest we just take a recess and come back at 1:30, 2 o'clock. That's
So
your
if
discretion.
you want to recess and then we're going to have Bobby Jean come back at 1:30, that's what we'll do in order to keep in with time.
So what are our rules for? We have council rules that says we are able to speak more than twice, and finance committees are actually supposed to be hashing things out.
Yeah, so why don't we take a recess and then we can discuss things further at 1:30.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we're in recess and we will reconvene at 1:30. I did like the time. I did that with some other things not there for me to allow you. Yeah, I don't know, but on the agenda.
Just being fair.